Greetings from Arab Center, Washington, D.C. This is Khalil Jahshan, and I would like to welcome all of you to this special program, expert interview with one of my colleagues, a dear colleague and friend who just came back from the region. And our conversation today with Dr. Radwan Ziadeh will focus on his 2 month visit to Syria after many, many years of absence. So we hope that our conversation today would shed some light on the changes that have taken place since December 8th of last year, when the regime of Bashar Assad collapsed and a new government has been set up in Syria. So we will be sending or basically directing questions regarding the change in Syria to Radwan, and hopefully we will be better informed after these 20 or 30 minutes of conversation about the change that has taken place in Syria. Radwan, welcome back, number
Thank you,
one.
Khalil.
And essentially, I guess, as I just mentioned, December 8th heralded a new period in the modern history of Syria as a country, with the collapse of the Assad regime after decades of very tight control, and gave Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, supported by other groups, which we hope to hear from you about the diversity, if you will, of the coalition governing Syria today, is now in charge and has an opportunity to make the changes that people have been fighting for at least 14 years, since 2011. Your visit, let me start with a personal question. Your visit in January and February of this year to Damascus, what struck you as having changed in Syria?
It is very personal to me. I never been in Syria in almost 18 years.
Yes.
When I arrived to the airport, the immigration person showed me the list of the security, and the decision has been taken against me. One of them, of course, death sentence. This is why for every Syrian who's been a while out of Syria, it's personal to be able to go into Syria. And in every Syrian now, they use the term, it's a dream comes true. No one exactly, even in the leadership right now, expected that quick victory in 11 days to happen. Because the Syrian, the Assad regime not only collapsed, it disappeared completely. You don't see any trace or any impact
And
for the security
the
force.
abrupt and speedy nature of the collapse made a big difference.
Exactly. And that's puzzle every Syrian expert, every Syrian researcher, to know exactly what's happened and what's happened within the Assad regime. As you know, Syria is a very close society. It's being ruled and governed by the Assad father, then the Assad son by Iron Fist. The security forces everywhere, the big status of Assad father, the son everywhere, the pictures. When I arrived to the airport, it's the same airport built in 1970. It's nothing changed in the country. There is no any impact for any development or any change in the country. And the car who took me from the airport to the hotel is made of 1969. I told to the driver, it's amazing you kept the car is going, but it show, of course, your high skills, but at the same
maintaining
time, but at the same time, it's issue of safety and of safety for anyone. But this is how the country itself has became outdated. And you can feel that when in your way from the airport to the capital, which the oldest inhabited city in the world right now. It's a 10,000 year of Damascus. In the old town, you struck about the history of every building and in every street, the birthplace of Christianity and in Islam. This is why it's a very historical, but at the same time, you feel how much outdated on the structure, the dirty on the street, the dirt on the street. At the same time, the clothes of the people, the type of car, the design, and everything. You feel actually you've been
It's like you're stepping back.
stepping back in the history on you still actually live in the 70s. And this is at the same time the joy of the Syrian people of the new victory, the joy and the happiness reflected on the face of every Syrian.
Yeah.
And the time for them to reconnect with the international community, to welcome visitors. I saw actually thousands of the people at the airport just being there to welcome anyone. Not every actually they have relative or expecting some friends there, but actually to welcome newcomers no matter who they are.
Yeah. Let me follow up. I remember watching on the news the flight you were on. That was a unique historic flight, wasn't it?
It is. It's
Could you tell us a little bit about that flight, how it was put together, and who was on it?
Still, I remember the name of the flight 110.
Right.
It's the Qatari Airways, and
Right.
that shows how
That was the first
international
flight,
international flight from Doha International Airport to the Damascus International Airport. I mean, the Syrians who's been the first time visit their country for almost, some of them 12 years, some of them 40 years.
Wow.
This is what the pilot couldn't control the flight itself. The joy, the people dancing inside the flight and chanting about the revolution, about the victory. It is very historical flight, and it shows the level of the happiness and the joy the Syrians, after the long time suffering of 14 years. I mean, there is no exact numbers, but if you make up of different numbers from international organization and local organization, almost 1 million Syrians lost their life during this 14 years. At the same time, you have 7 million refugees, 4 million displaced. It's, I mean, 2/3 of the Syrian people got affected by different ways, being displaced, being a refugee, or you have someone in the family got lost.
Yeah. Let's dive into the political substance of the situation right now. From your perspective, having just visited and spent adequate time, 2 months is definitely a privilege at this time to spend in Syria with the changing situation. What are the main challenges facing the new government? Let's talk about the different aspect. I mean, is it a political challenge? Is it a security challenge? Is it an economic? Is it strategic and international? Or is it a combination of all of them?
The main challenge, and you can hear that from every Syrian, no matter what the affiliation or your ethnic group or political group, it's the sanction. Mm-hmm. The destruction of the country is beyond imagination. Every city who's been destructed, like in Damascus, if you go just north into Jobel,
the suburbs have been decimated.
Disseminate, level to the ground. In Yarmouk camp, which the Palestinian refugee camp, 110,000 residential unit has been destroyed completely. According to the World Bank, the reconstruction, it may be cost almost $300 billion.
Wow.
And when the new administration, they seized the central bank, they found only $200 million. It's a huge gap between the two numbers. And this is why the sanctions is now became the most important issue for the Syrians. And looking for the international community, especially the United States and the EU, to lift the sanctions to be able to start the reconstruction, because there is no foreign investments will come, and there is even the nations who helped, who wish to help Syria, like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. They will not be able to do that if there is a sanction still in place. And the argument that the Syrians right now they have, that the sanctions put in place because of the Assad regime. Now the Assad left. Why we still have the sanctions?
Punishing the population, punishing the public.
Exactly.
Yeah. So from your perspective then, the economy really is the biggest challenge, and sanctions have to be removed to give breathing space
Exactly.
to the
As
new
we
government.
say, there is a transition in every country,
Right.
moved from dictatorship into more pluralistic society. And you have to have a success transition. You have a sizable middle class to be able to carry on this
Its
transition.
responsibilities.
And this is why, according to the UN, more than 90% of the Syrian under poverty line. There is no sizable middle class to be able to carry on the transition and move it into more direct, into more democratic Syria. The sanctions is a one, two, three demands of the Syrian people to be able for the middle class to move from the need into the want, into more the political ask, into more to the political freedom, freedom of association, freedom of, and this is an important issue. But at the same time, every Syrian is looking into the steps of the transition. If the transition has to be orderly and has to be organized. While I was there, there was two key events. The first one, of course, the preparatory committee for the national dialogue, which then the organizing of the national conference of dialogue, which, by the way, it's have been taking place in the People Palace, which the presidential palace there. For me, is the first time to visit the presidential palace. And the people got the joy to be able to go through the rooms, go to the gardens. There is no security there. There is no whatsoever. More than 700 participants in the dialogue conference being in the presidential palace for the first time. The discussion was focused more on the political transition, on transitional justice, economic reform, basic and personal freedoms. And the final communique was very, very positive when focused on the need of setting up a commission for transitional justice, the need for political dialogue, the need for plurality, and more, of course, upsetting that the final communique did not mention the word democracy, which we pushed for and hoped for. But at the same time, I think it's when it mentioned the word of freedom and the need of the Syrian to practice freedom in all different aspects of life, political and economic. It's maybe request adjust some of the concern we had on the issue of democracy.
The omission of the word democracy, was that accidental, or were there differences over the definition?
We should understand that Syria will not be a Jeffersonian democracy overnight.
Of course not.
With all the challenges we have. Now it's the first challenge of the Syrian, of course, to keep stability and the safety. And that's something I enjoyed so much when I was there, to be able to go to any restaurant in any neighborhood in Syria, in Damascus, to go to Bab Tuma and in all this Christian neighborhood,
Right.
to be able and have dinner until 2 or 3 a.m. I imagine this will never happen in Iraq, when the Americans were there with a large number of troops, where they have curfew at the 6 p.m. or something like that. In Syria, you enjoy the stability and enjoy. I think keep the safety and the stability is the key issue, lifting the sanctions. At the same time, the Syrian went through those 14 years unimaginable life. They need a time to recover. At the same time, I don't think they will give up their freedom.
Yeah.
For anyone.
You did refer to the destruction that has taken place in the country. It was as a result of the vicious handling of the previous regime. Cities were totally decimated. Whole neighborhoods were erased off the surface of the earth in many cities. That caused a disintegration of some sort of Syrian society, kind of more like going backward to tribal and sectarian and so on. So now the country is having difficulty resuming, if you will, national unity in light of what happens. What do you believe, based on your visit, is the quickest method to do that? I mean, people now are suggesting representative democracy. People are suggesting federalism. There are all kinds of suggestions that you are aware of. How do you feel that Syria should proceed the next few years?
I absolutely agree on the gap between the suburb and the urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge, and this is why if you go to the suburb, everyone is looking for the new administration. Does this administration will be able to lift the sanctions to move forward? And other time, I mean, this is in my hometown in Daraya. Before 2011, the population of Daraya was 300,000 people. It's a big city. And now only 50 to 60,000,
Wow.
they return into the town because there is no drinking water, there is no electricity. And by the way,
Is the total population 50, or the returnees are 50,000?
The returnees only.
Oh, okay,
only 50. Of course, it's Daraya, as every city, suffered a lot as a political prisoners, as a missing people, as a lack of down of state services. The electricity in Syria now, it's only 1 hour per day.
Wow.
You can't build an economy on that. This is why the economic challenges is immense and beyond our the capacity of this current administration. It's need the help of the international community. This is why you see the current administration is always open arms to any. And in their foreign policy, they have very clear that we need to set up a good relationship with all neighbors. We need to normalize our relationship with the Jordan, Lebanon, and all other countries where they use the Assad regime to make troubles and play cards with the other neighboring countries. No, the current administration, they're focused on their country right now, making peace with all neighboring countries, and to be able to move forward with all the challenges they have during the transition.
Yeah, let me explore that a little bit deeper with you. Clearly, where Syria is today and the way it needs to recover in this post-Assad period, which was very kind of overwhelming for more than 5 decades. It seems to me that Syria needs to build new coalitions, both internally and externally. Could you give us a couple of minutes on both the internal front? How is Syrian society going to come together through these new coalitions and not to basically have just one party or one trend, one political trend dominate, to avoid the old Syria of Assad, and what's happening regionally also internationally?
Yeah, exactly. This is why now we see the current government, it's open up. The invitees into the National Dialogue Conference was from the extreme right to the extreme left. There is no block into any name. And you can see all ethnic groups or different religion group got invited and participated in the dialogue and the discussion. And we look for that's the inclusivity in the appointments of the new government and in new members of the legislative body, which should be announced maybe within this month. I mean, there is a very optimistic sign of those government open up into more, and because they discover from the day one, you cannot govern Syria as the Assad regime used to govern Syria. It's now Syria is a more pluralistic, more multi-ethnic, multi-religious groups, and you have to accept the reality and see this one as an opportunity, as a wealth of Syria, rather than. And this is the democracy is the only system to be able to manage all these ethnic differences and this
diversity,
diversity as a way of strength of Syria, not see diversity as a weakness of Syria.
Yes, I agree with you. Regionally, is that also the challenge being met to kind of reestablish? I mean, who are Syria's allies today? Clearly, they're not the same as prior to December 8th.
Exactly. This is why normalizing Syria relationship with the Arab countries and with the regional countries, except Iran, of course, it's very welcomed among the Syrians. Now you can say that the three big allies of the new administration, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey. This is why Qatar stepped very quickly to help the airport to be able to connect the Syrian to the world, and the Saudis step in quickly to help rebuilding the medical sector, which it's been disaster when you visit the hospitals. There is no any kind of instrument. There is no kind of medical.
So the infrastructure, I mean, the talent is there, but the infrastructure
Exactly,
is not.
exactly. There is the infrastructure. It reminder you that if maybe you are in Cuba, where when you hear the stories about the lack of any kind of medicine, they ask for any patient actually set of things and to buy it from outside Syria, and you come back. It's a very I mean, as a Syrian, you feel how the countries became on its knees by the Assad regime, and I think that's one of the reason maybe explained the downfall of the Assad regime very quickly, because its economy played a very critical role. I mean, the salary now for every professor, it's $7 to $10. And I met with the head of the Supreme Court in Syria. They call it Constitutional Court. His salary it's a $60. It that maybe explain a little bit how the Syrian abandoned the regime, the Assad regime, very quickly, because they got nothing after 14 years. They said, okay, let's not to fight on behalf of the Assad regime, and jump into maybe new
What the
future.
change would bring.
Yeah.
You alluded earlier to the security challenges, and you felt that there is a sense of stability in the country, allowing people to go in and out and go out and visit and travel and so on. I noticed today in the news there was apparently some incidents pertaining to security. I just wanted you to help us understand that. I think this one is in Ladiqiyah. This is dated March 4th. It says Syrian forces launch sweep as Assad loyalists accused of attacks in Ladiqiyah. What's happening? Is there a revival?
No, thanks for the question, because I just tweeted today that there is some incidents happened in the last 3 days in Latakia, in Tartus, in Homs, and in Jaraman and other. If there is a coordination between these incidents, more than 10 members of the general security, which I mean the main administration who keep the security in the country, has been attacked and killed. If there is a coordination or not. But of course, everyone in Syria believes that the challenge is immense and security is still a question. Where is the Assad loyalists disappeared? Where? Do they have a plan to reorganize
Reassert
themselves?
Yeah.
Reassert. Most of them, they went to the mountains in Latakia. Do they have the funding, the financing to be able to re-emerge? What type of plan they do have? This is why it's important to deal with the issue not only from the security point of view, but also from political point of view, and to be able to open negotiation with them, and to be able to bring them to the table and give them the feeling and the comfort that Syria is for all, and that you have a seat on the table as much as any other groups. And this is negotiation, and this type of let's say debate and discussion is going on in Syria right now.
And here we're talking essentially about the Alawite community, right?
Exactly, where most of the concern coming from the Alawite, because they felt that most of the top leaders within the Assad regime, especially in the security, and those committed heinous war crimes and crimes against humanity. And this is why it's important for the new administration not to repeat the mistakes of what's happened in Iraq. We don't give the message that the Sunni community in Iraq got targeted. We don't need to send the message that the Alawite community got targeted. No, those individuals who committed war crimes and human rights violation should be held accountable for their crimes. But that does not mean that the Alawite community is responsible on the crimes committed during the Assad regime.
Yeah. Let me ask you about another area of insecurity pertaining to another suburb of Damascus, closer to the city, Jarmana. And the fact that this area is essentially or mostly Druze. And the fact of the matter, it's not only related to the kind of ethnic diversity in the country, but somehow all of a sudden Israel is taking advantage of this issue and trying to intrude into internal Syrian affairs. Help us understand what's going on in Jaramana.
I visited Jaramana and I visited Suwaida.
Mm-hmm.
And I met most of the groups representing different, let's say, communities in Suwaida.
Mm-hmm.
I think none of them they ask for the Israeli help, which the Israeli Prime Minister pretend that he's calling to help the Druze in the community. And the Israeli action does not help in the transition in Syria. Even that there is a most feeling among the Syrian that maybe Israel will be it targeted to destroy the transition in Syria rather than actually helping the transition in Syria. And this is why I think that this administration being very quiet
Mm-hmm.
on the Israeli actions, because it hoped that through diplomatic ways, through the United States or through other countries, can press Israel to stop its action in Syria. Every day in Syria, you hear the news about maybe targeting some military assets belong to the Assad government, or some targets there and there, and you hear very troubling statements by the Israeli Prime Minister,
Very much so.
which look the Syrians from the sectarian lens rather than actually look to the Syrian as belong to the Syrian themselves, no matter their ethnic or religious group.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is very troubling, and we hope the United States can take the necessary action to help Syria in this difficult time.
Yeah. Question about the international relationships between Damascus and other countries, particularly, I guess, country like that used to be very definitely present in Syrian politics, Russia. It seems like there is a renewed attempt to talk back and forth between Damascus and Moscow, or is it exaggerated? Is there a new communication?
Before we comes to Russia, I think we have also to check that Iran it's the big loser of the change in Damascus, and that's something achieved a demand overlong demand by the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
that when they target the Iranian militia in Syria and they ask Iran to stay out. This administration, through this victory, achieved this demand by forcing Iran to leave Syria, and that's created a vacuum. Should the U.S. engage with the new administration to be able to fill such a vacuum, rather than Iran to come back to Syria through windows or through different affiliations?
Back doors, yeah.
Exactly, and exactly the same thing apply into Russia. Russia, it's a permanent member at the Security Council, and the new administration understand that very carefully. This is why they open type of negotiation. Of course, the Russian presence in Syria is not welcome publicly. Is not welcome on let's say by different political affiliation or different groups,
because of its relationship with the previous regime.
the previous regime and the crimes they committed and the war
Right.
crimes during Aleppo and Eastern Ghouta and in all of that. And in all of that got very well documented.
Mm-hmm.
Russia, when not target the terrorists or the ISIS, as they said, they target civilians in Aleppo and they killed and they target the opposition itself in different areas. This is why Russia is responsible on war crimes and crimes against humanity. And then I don't think the Syrians, they have short memory to forget all of that overnight. But at the same time, Russia, it's allowed Bashar al-Assad to stay in their lands without giving the Syrians the time to bring Bashar al-Assad into justice for the crimes committed in Syria during this 14 or 25 years. This is one of the issues, is a hot topic between the negotiation between the current administration and Russia. That the current administration in Syria, they ask for Russia to hand over Bashar al-Assad. And then, of course, Bashar al-Assad, is not alone there. He brought with him top leaders in the security and top leaders in the army. Those committed crimes in Syria should be held accountable of their crimes. And then above all of that, the money.
Yeah.
It's Russia's became the save for the
Haven.
Syrian officials for their money. And the reports coming from the Financial Times and in other media outlet, it mentioned more than $300 million assets there. And Bashar Assad maybe was planning to go to Moscow before ahead. This is why he transferred most of the money and the funds there.
I see. Let's conclude with an issue I know that's dear to your heart because you've been working on this academically, research-wise, here at the center for several years, the issue of the Constitution. Tell us a bit, brief us about what steps have been taken thus far with regard to writing a new constitution for the country, and what are the main impediments right now?
Now the current administration, they announced the name of the preparatory committee to draft a constitutional declaration, not permanent constitution. Either it's called constitutional declaration.
Right.
It's the discussion now. It will be short or long, and how many articles should. It reflects, of course, the identity of the state, reflects the different tasks of the state. My ideal that it should have reflect also the aspiration of the Syrians to be a democratic state, and should be something included in the declaration. This is why I had a conversation with the many members of such committee, and I sent to them a draft into it should be taken into consideration some of the articles of the new constitution. But at the same time, the top issues now in Syria right now, of course, having constitution reflect of the need of freedom and the respect of human rights, respect of women's rights. At the same time, transitional justice. Transitional justice became a key issue, and that's reflect on the final communique of the National Conference of Dialogue, which with the need of transitional set up a commission for transitional justice to be able to investigate of what's happened in the last 14 years. At the same time, bring the people who are responsible on the crimes into justice. At the same time, look into ways for reparation on individual level and also into more regional level.
Meanwhile, keep the country moving forward.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Radwan. We really appreciate you spending time with us and trying to explain these very difficult questions. I mean, you read about all these things in the media and so on, and think tank and research analysis, but it's good to have a witness who witnessed firsthand the steps being undertaken right now in Syria. So thank you so much, Radwan, for your focus on this issue, very important issue in terms of the agenda of Arab Center, Washington, D.C., focusing on essentially change in the region, and particularly the development of democracy and human rights throughout the region. I hope that you did enjoy our guest today and benefited from his answers regarding these vital issues.